If you've just watched the new Wuthering Heights adaptation starring Margot, Robbie and Jacob Elordi and found yourself wondering what Emily Brontë actually wrote, you're not alone. Because the novel is not just a simple tragic romance, it is a study of identity denied, class cruelty breeding vengeance, racism shaping psychology, and what happens when someone attempts to divide their soul into two. And when that architecture is misunderstood, the story loses its spine. If you're new here, hi, my name is Cathy Krieger. I'm currently on a little vacation staying in a Victorian house that feels very Wuthering Heights, Thrushcross Grange. And I'm excited because I've been living with Wuthering Heights in my heart and in my soul since I was 17. I first read Wuthering Heights after falling in love with the 1939 adaptation starring Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff and Mel Oberon as Cathy. Still my favourite version, even though it's so different from the novel. It's a standalone movie, just like this new one, as so many people have told me. At 17, I thought I understood the story. I didn't. When I opened the novel, the atmosphere felt harsher, the relationships was far more volatile, the emotional stakes felt exposed in a way that was almost uncomfortable, and there was a whole second generation that wasn't included in that movie that gave this story a redemption arc. At 20, I played Cathy in an independent theatre production. For years before that, I had read her speeches aloud to myself in my room, pretending I was talking to Heathcliff, and standing on stage, saying those lines in front of an audience, having my own Heathcliff say those other lines back to me. It forced me to inhabit her fully. It was a dream come true and changed how I truly understood Cathy Earnshaw. At 20, I understood her passion. I understood loving someone so intensely that the rest of the world felt secondary. Who doesn't at 20? At 22, I travelled all the way from Australia to Haworth in the Yorkshire Moors where Emily Brontë lived, the Brontë sisters lived and wrote. And I walked the moors, and what struck me wasn't romance, it was scale, vastness, the elemental indifference of the landscape. Standing there, I understood how deeply the terrain shaped how Emily Brontë wrote Wuthering Heights. The moors are not decorative in Wuthering Heights, they are structural. They hold the emotional temperature of the story. So let's ground ourselves in what actually happens in Wuthering Heights, the novel. So the story unfolds across two houses, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. An orphan boy named Heathcliff is brought home by Mr. Earnshaw and is raised alongside his two children, Hindley and Catherine Earnshaw. There's always a little bit of debate whether Heathcliff is actually a son of Mr. Earnshaw. It's never confirmed nor denied, and could explain the intense bond that Cathy and Heathcliff have. It was a sibling bond that they mistook for other. But as children, Cathy and Heathcliff do form a really intense bond on the moors, wild, exclusive, and almost defiant of everybody around them. After Mr. Earnshaw dies, Hindley takes control and his jealousy erupts. He humiliates Heathcliff, strips him of education, and forces him into their servant stable boy. The degradation reshapes Heathcliff. Cathy grows up and she marries Edgar Linton, a refined neighbour who offers social security and status, and then Heathcliff disappears. Years later, he returns wealthy and hardened, and from that point forward, the novel becomes a study in revenge and its consequences ripple into the next generation. Because this is crucial, Wuthering Heights does not end with Cathy's death. The novel is generational, and at the centre of everything is Cathy and Heathcliff. Let's talk about Heathcliff. Heathcliff is a product of class cruelty. He enters the household marked as socially undefined, described as dark-skinned, foreign, gypsy-like. He has no lineage, no inheritance, no secure place within Victorian society. And I do not defend Heathcliff's actions in the book. I never have and I never will. His cruelty is real and often unforgivable. I do defend the wound at his centre, the denial of his identity. He feels everything deeply and no one teaches him how to process that safely. Cathy recognises something fundamental in him, and when she says, "I am Heathcliff," she means it beyond emotion. Clarifies that it is in her soul. This identity fusion, spiritual, metaphysical. Their connection is not sexual, as we saw in the 2026 version. It is existential. It is the terror of losing that person who mirrors your own interior self back to you. That is far more destabilising than physical intimacy. And that kind of bond also could never settle into domestic life, a happy marriage. They would have destroyed each other. Passion at that level does not soften into drawing room stability. It detonates. Cathy is often labelled as selfish, and at 20, I completely rejected that. I saw her as fiercely passionate and misunderstood. At 30, I see more complexity. She is trapped, immature, slightly selfish, and completely frightened. Society offered women almost no economic agency. Marriage determined survival. If she had married Heathcliff while he was degraded, her word, she would have been socially discarded alongside him. So she divides herself. She marries Edgar for security and believes she can remain spiritually bound to Heathcliff. Division has consequence, and she was highly immature when she made this decision. Death scene reveals it. When I performed it, I remember clinging to the actor playing Heathcliff as though the proximity between us could undo what had happened. Heathcliff's plea in this scene, "Why did you betray your own heart, Cathy?" is existential. The betrayal is internal before it is relational, and this is where Gothic framework becomes essential. In Gothic fiction, time does not move cleanly forward. The past presses into the present, emotional injury lingers, and identity hardens around unresolved longing. Heathcliff chooses haunting over healing, and that choice defines him. He asks for Cathy's ghost, begs her to haunt him, drive him mad, do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. He builds his identity around grievance, and in doing so, he perpetuates the cruelty that shapes him. Cathy and Heathcliff are so fascinating alone, and how they hurt themselves. But what makes them even more fascinating as characters is who they hurt around them. And we can't acknowledge Cathy and Heathcliff without acknowledging those caught in the storm. Talk about Edgar and Isabella Linton. Edgar Linton, of course, Cathy's future husband, widow, is often dismissed as dull. He isn't. Edgar is collateral damage in a storm he never created. He deeply loves Cathy. That's something that can never, ever be denied. His love is steady, gentle, structured. He offers her safety and respectability. He pays for loving someone that is spiritually divided. He loves her within the boundaries of his own world. That does not make him inferior. It makes him human in a story that often feels supernatural. And then there is Isabella, who I think is such a fascinating character and who really was the biggest victim in all of this. She enters believing in romance. She leaves a single mother and an abuse survivor. Heathcliff does not lose control with Isabella. He is deliberate. He uses her as part of his revenge against Edgar and Cathy. Through Isabella's letters after she's married Heathcliff, Brontë exposes the domestic cruelty of resentment. She strips Heathcliff of myth. He is not a romantic anti-hero. He is a man inflicting injury. And when he hangs her dog, Brontë removes any romantic ambiguity. This is not brooding intensity. This is cruelty exercised for power. Through Edgar and Isabella, the novel makes something clear. Cathy and Heathcliff are not the only ones wounded. Others pay for their division, their choices, and their passion. Once Cathy dies, Emily Brontë shifts the lens. The second half introduces Hareton Earnshaw, Hindley's son, young Catherine Linton, Cathy and Edgar's daughter, and Linton Heathcliff, who is Heathcliff and Isabella's son. This structural shift is deliberate because Heathcliff degrades Hareton just as Hindley degraded him. And it's really, really important that this happens because this is where we begin to have a redemption arc in this story. And without it, the story is just a flat book about two horrible people inflicting hurt. Trauma repeats unless someone interrupts it. And Hareton, Hindley's son, interrupts it. He does not become Heathcliff. He learns, he grows, he develops humility. Cathy, who never really didn't get to know her mother at all. Her mother died giving birth to her. Young Cathy carries her mother's intelligence, but she adapts differently. She softens what came before. I was in the theatre production, the playwright who adapted the book into the play, Amelia, you better be watching this. She always loved Hareton and young Cathy. She believed their love redeemed the generation before them, and she was right. She is right. Their connection is grounded, earned, and built through patience and education. They inherit damage and choose differently. This is the quiet revolution of the novel. Heathcliff weakens near the end. His obsession is exhausting him. The sight of Hareton and young Cathy together unsettles him. He hates young Cathy. He blames her for her mother's death. But what unsettles him about seeing these two is not rage, it's recognition. Something he could never stabilize is unfolding without him. He dies still bound to Cathy. He says that she is haunting him and calling him towards her. And then he dies. And Hareton and young Cathy inherit everything. And they choose differently. And this is where the hope in Wuthering Heights lies. Everyone just tells me, oh, it's such a bleak and horrible novel. Oh, it's so terrible. Oh, I hate it. Oh, read it to the end. Read it. Because the hope in Wuthering Heights is not in spectacle, not in passion, but in the possibility of breaking a cycle. Standing on those moors at 22, feeling how small I was against the vastness, I understood something really simple. Nature outlasts human drama. Storms pass in life and cycles can be broken. And this is where Wuthering Heights endures. This is the story I love. Not because it's romantic, not because it's passionate, but because it's honest. I think that's something that we could all relate to. We all come from family sagas and family stories, and we all have trauma in our lives and trauma from our parents and trauma from people that came before us, but we can choose to break the cycle and choose better for ourselves and our future generation. And that's what Hareton and Cathy do. And I think that is simply remarkable for a woman living in the 1800s in an isolated place in England who hadn't really traveled, hadn't really had much life experience, was in her 20s, was able to see the world this way and sit down and write in the most incredibly intense, passionate way. I don't know about you, but I think watching this whole story unfold on screen is far more interesting than watching two stunningly beautiful people, great actors, great human beings, have sex on screen. We have Bridgerton for that, and I love that TV show, and I can go watch that if I want to watch two stunning people have sex on screen. But Wuthering Heights is so much deeper, so much more nuanced, so much more intellectual than that. And I think to watch this whole story unfold and have this redemption arc, that if you end with Cathy's death, you don't get the redemption arc, you don't get the happy ending, you don't get the story solved. I think watching that unfold on screen is much more interesting, and I would love to see it. If you'd like to watch my very honest and very in-depth review of the 2026 adaptation, I will link it below. And I'm going to end here and get out of this really steamily hot room. How people lived in the 1800s without air conditioner and modern conveniences. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like these sort of in-depth reviews, please subscribe.